Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute miracle that is the 4.6 billion year journey of life on Earth. We're talking a massive leap from a boiling, toxic rock all the way to the incredibly complex human existence we know today. And hey, if you're gearing up for competitive exams like the UPSC, stick around, because I'll be dropping some really handy memory tricks along the way. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to move sequentially through 5 sections, from a lifeless Earth to the first ray of life, then oxygen and cellular evolution, the major theories of evolution, the geologic timescale, and finally, the incredible mystery of the Denisovan humans.
Starting right off with Section 1, from lifeless Earth to first ray. Picture the Earth about 4.6 billion years ago. No trees, no beautiful blue skies. Instead, imagine a boiling, toxic rock being constantly hammered by lightning strikes, erupting volcanoes, and get this, absolutely zero oxygen. It looked way less like our home and, honestly, more like a terrifying alien hellscape. If you tried to take a breath, your lungs would literally burn. Sounds deadly, right? But here is a crazy question for you. Could that complete lack of breathable oxygen actually be the exact reason we're alive today? Well, before we answer that, let's lock in a quick memory trick for your exams. So the Earth was formed approximately 4.6 billion years ago, right? If you know the Hindi word for Earth, which is Prithvi, you can use its spelling as a neat little mnemonic. The first letter, pa, looks remarkably like the number 4, and the second letter, cha, looks just like the number 6. Anchor that in your mind. Pa and cha, 4 and 6. And bam, you've got the 4.6 billion year timeline perfectly memorized. Now, life starting on that ancient rock wasn't magic. It was what we call chemical evolution. This is a materialistic theory heavily championed by a scientist named A.I.O. Perrin. Basically, he argued that life originated simply from the collision and binding of non-living chemicals. For your test prep, just remember the letter O. O stands for Oparin, and O stands for his famous book, Origin of Life. Easy, right?
So, circling back to our oxygen question, why was the complete absence of it so absolutely critical? Well, the early atmosphere was this chaotic, toxic chemical soup made of methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and carbon dioxide. And because there was no ozone layer to protect the planet, intense UV rays and constant lightning blasted these chemicals, giving them the massive burst of energy they needed to bind together in the primordial ocean. Here's the absolute crucial takeaway. If free oxygen had existed back then, it would have immediately caused oxidation. That means it would have destroyed those delicate carbon bonds in a flash, preventing that chemical soup from ever creating life.
Moving right along to Section 2, Oxygen and Cellular Evolution. Let's trace the ultimate hero's journey of cellular life. Around 4 billion years ago, those chemicals we just talked about formed nucleoproteins. Think of these as virus-like, anaerobic particles, essentially the very first ray of life. Since they couldn't make their own food, they just kind of absorbed the chemical soup around them. But eventually, the soup started running out. This massive food crisis essentially forced these early organisms to mutate or die. So, around 3.8 billion years ago, simple prokaryotic cells emerged. This included cyanobacteria that actually figured out how to use sunlight and water to make their own food. Talk about a game changer. And this paved the way for complex eukaryotic cells, the ones with a distinct nucleus for DNA, about 2 billion years ago. Now, those cyanobacteria I just mentioned, which you might know as blue-green algae, triggered something massive, the Great Oxidation Event. By making their own food through photosynthesis, they released a revolutionary byproduct. Yep, oxygen. Over billions of years, these tiny microscopic algae worked tirelessly, completely terraforming our world and filling the atmosphere with the very oxygen we breathe today. But you know, every action has a reaction. While that new oxygen completely paved the way for higher energy production and complex life forms like us, it was an absolute disaster for the original inhabitants of Earth. Ironically, the very oxygen that gives us life today acted as a deadly, deadly poison to those early anaerobic organisms that had evolved to thrive without it. As the oxygen levels skyrocketed, it wiped them out entirely, triggering Earth's very first mass extinction. Wild, right? All right, on to Section 3, Major Theories of Evolution. We're now stepping on to the grand battlefield of biology. How on earth did a single cell eventually become elephants, ants, and, well, us humans? The first major theory hit the scene in 1809 from Jean-Baptiste Lamarck and his book Philosophique zoologique. He proposed the inheritance of acquired traits. Another quick mnemonic for our Hindi speakers, connect the law in Lamarck with the law in Lakshan, which means traits. Basically, Lamarck theorized that organisms pass down physical changes that they acquire during their lifetime to survive environmental challenges. His go-to example? The giraffe. He argued that early giraffes actually had short necks, but as they stretched and stretched to reach higher leaves, their necks physically grew, and then they passed that newly acquired long neck down to their babies.
It sounds like a neat, logical story, doesn't it? But think about the gym body fallacy. If Lamarck was actually right, a man who spends years lifting heavy weights in the gym to build huge muscles would have a baby born as a tiny, ripped bodybuilder. Obviously, that doesn't happen. And this brilliantly exposes the fatal flaw in Lamarckism. Modern genetics proves that the changes you make in the gym only affect your somatic or physical cells. Only the traits encoded deep in your DNA, in your germ cells, are actually passed on to the next generation. So yeah, Lamarck was ultimately proven wrong on this one.
This brings us to 1859, and to a name you definitely know, Charles Darwin. He completely changed our understanding of evolution with his famous book, Origin of Species, where he introduced the theory of natural selection. For our exam prep, you can easily lock this into your memory by linking the Da in Darwin to the Da in Dabov, which translates to the pressure of nature. So let's look at how Darwin tackled that whole giraffe problem differently. First off, he said there's pre-existing variation. Darwin noted that giraffes didn't just magically stretch their necks over time. Nope, they were just born with natural variations. Some happen to be short, some happen to be long. Second step, nature acts as a brutal filter. When food on the ground ran out, it created immense environmental pressure. The short-necked giraffes, they simply starved. And finally, survival of the fittest. Only the long-necked giraffes survived long enough to reproduce and pass down that specific successful DNA. Nature didn't actively create the long neck, it simply selected the ones best adapted to survive the current conditions.
Darwin's theory is incredibly logical, for sure, but it actually had one massive missing piece. I mean, he couldn't really explain where that initial variation even came from. If all giraffes shared a common ancestor, how did a long-necked one just suddenly appear out of nowhere? Enter a scientist from Holland named Hugo de Vries. To remember him, just note that the Hugh in Hugo sounds a bit like the Ho in Holland. By experimenting on the evening primrose plant, de Vries proved that evolution doesn't always just happen at a slow, creeping pace. Sometimes when DNA is copying itself, it makes sudden typing mistakes or genetic errors. He called these mutations, and these mutations are exactly the source of those brand new traits that nature then goes on to filter.
Let's jump to section 4, geological timescale. Because these evolutionary changes literally span billions of years, our standard 365-day calendar is completely useless here. Instead, scientists rely on a very specific hierarchy for dating rock layers and fossils. And by the way, this sequence frequently pops up in state PCS and UPSC exams, so pay attention. It filters all the way down from the massive eons at the very top into eras, then periods, epochs, and finally the smallest unit, the ages. Getting this exact sequence right is absolutely essential for understanding the grand calendar of Earth's history. And our final section, number 5, the mystery of the Denisovan humans. Let's apply this understanding of deep geological time to an incredibly recent archaeological discovery that completely shook the scientific world. We often have this mental picture of human evolution as a simple, straight march from monkeys directly to modern humans. But honestly, that is completely false. Evolution is actually this wildly branching, tangled, messy tree. And just when we think we have all the branches mapped out perfectly, we dig deep into the Earth's layers and uncover entirely new, totally unexpected ancestors that literally force us to rewrite the textbooks.
Case in point, the Denisovans. Get this, before the year 2010, the scientific community had absolutely no idea this human species even existed. The discovery was made in the Denisova cave over in freezing Siberia, and the evidence? Just a tiny, single finger bone and a tooth. That's it. But when scientists extracted the DNA, the results were absolutely staggering. These individuals lived around 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, and their genetic code matched neither us, Homo sapiens, nor the Neanderthals. It was a completely distinct, previously unknown branch of the human family tree, just hiding there in the dirt.
But the story gets even more fascinating. Fast forward to 2019, and evidence of these Denisovans was found thousands of miles away from Siberia, high up on the Tibetan Plateau. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of genetic adaptation that we've been talking about today. The Denisovans didn't just survive the freezing Siberian cold. They thrived in the extreme, low-oxygen environment of Tibet. And amazingly, because of ancient interbreeding, parts of that specific altitude-adapting Denisovan DNA live on today. It's actively helping modern Tibetans and Sherpas survive at those extreme, breathtaking heights right now.
We've covered billions of years today, going from a toxic chemical soup all the way to the complex DNA survival of the Denisovans. And I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. Evolution is not a closed book. Think about it. If a tiny finger bone discovered just a few years ago can completely rewrite our understanding of human history, then just imagine what else is down there. Within the vast Matryoshka doll of geological time, how many more of our shared, unsolved mysteries are waiting right beneath our feet, just waiting to be unearthed tomorrow? Keep that curiosity alive, keep studying hard for those exams, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.